We usually don't get involved till things start going south, but in my dream world, people are calling me the minute they get hurt because we have 3 unique positions, and one of them is we help everyone who calls us. I want everyone to be helped, whether it's a pinky or, the worst catastrophic injury there can be. We have 4 people on our intake team where we educate. We give them the information. And then there comes a time that this is the time you need to have an attorney. This time you need to at least speak to an attorney. So then there's 4 of us, 4 workers' comp attorneys in the firm, and that's when we're making that final decision. Yes, you need a lawyer.
Got it.
This is RVA Trial Lawyers, Virginia's trial lawyer podcast, hosted by Sharif Gray and Niall Abuzaki.
All right, we're back, RVA Trial Lawyers, and today we've fortunate enough to have a special guest, Michele Lewane. Did I pronounce that correctly?
You sure did.
All right, because I was worried that I would mess that up. So Michele and I met. I had a client who had a third-party case. The case had resolved, but I remember he was hurt on the job by a third party, so another vehicle that hit him while he was driving the work truck, and he was having some trouble with workers' compensation. Actually, I remember this case fairly well now. And I remember thinking like, all right, well, I need to find somebody to send him to because I don't know what I'm doing with workers' compensation, and I'm not even going to pretend. I actually, the line I use, Michele, is like when people ask me about stuff I don't know, to include workers' compensation, I tell them that I'm as useful as a Google search because that's the truth, right? Yeah. But anyways, I remember finding you guys, and I spoke with one of your colleagues, Sarah, and you guys called immediately. You took the case on, and then ultimately reviewed the case, gave our client and told our client, you're going to be better off without us, and then gave him a guide to help him navigate the process. And ultimately, he got a result that waived the workers' comp lien and maximized his personal injury recovery. So it was from that case that I think you and I then met, had lunch, we've been in touch, and I send a lot of people your way. So it's funny how the world works, but really happy to have you on the podcast. If you wouldn't mind, go ahead and just introduce yourself real quick, and then we'll get right into it.
Sure. Thank you very much. So I've been practicing law for a very long time, 1989, and I just gradually gravitated to workers' comp. And so I have done pretty much everything. So I guess on one level, I've done numerous criminal and PI jury trials back in the day. So I kind of knew about workers' comp, but nobody else did it. And there was no, like when I was in law school, there was no class on workers' comp. And so I kind of just got thrown at it, and I just started doing it. And I loved the medical aspect of it, and then obviously the helping people. So you're helping people at a really bad time in their life, probably like most, all lawyers, we're helping people. So right. You're helping people at a really bad time in their life, and I really can see how effective that is. You know what I mean? Like we can really help these people who know nothing, about workers' comp when they get hurt on the job. They think they're suing their employer and they're going to get fired, and they don't know all the rules. They don't know that maybe 6% of work injuries aren't even covered by workers' comp. There's so many loopholes, and they're dealing with an insurance company and maybe a defense attorney, and that's their job 24/7. And here's this injured worker first time, and oops, they didn't give notice, or oops, they didn't file this piece of paper, or oops, they didn't look for a job, and all of these things. So that motivated me maybe 15 years ago, a long time. We're like on actually our 13th edition, because that's how much the workers' comp has changed through the years, like of a book. And so what you're talking about is I wrote a book numerous years ago to basically help people, give injured workers basically the 101 on the basics, right? And hopefully to help them help themselves. And then if they need a lawyer, to then obviously hopefully call us and we can represent them. So that's probably exactly what happened to your client is that, he didn't need us, but he just needed to know about workers' comp. So we gave him the book, we gave him some probably other resources, and that's what happened.
Yeah,
So,
well, I know he was super happy and appreciative of the guidance that you guys gave him. And I know you work a lot, or you were a part or still a part of Ben Glass's approach, but this concept of like just adding value.
yes.
Adding value first and then seeing how the world kind of gives that back to you in return is really cool. And it's something that I practice. And it's clear that you've done that and done it to quite a bit of success. I'd like to learn a little bit more before we get, so I have tons of questions because when it comes to like workers' comp, I'm as useful as a Google search, but I'd like to learn more about who you are, where you grew up, how you got into this thing called law, right? Would you be okay going into a little bit about that?
Sure. Okay, I was not prepared for that question. So hopefully if anyone who knows me is listening, go, that's not true. That happened at a different time. Well, whatever. So I pretty much grew up in Richmond, okay? And I went to collegiate from 5th grade through my, senior year of high school. I grew up Catholic, so I was very active in my church. So tons of my friends went to Benedictine and St. Gertrude's. And so then I went to UVA, and I wanted to be, because I loved my high school English teacher. I wanted to be a high school English teacher, okay? So I was an English major, which was great. I read literature. And then I started student teaching. Wrong thing for me. I was inner city Charlottesville, so you take a small private school to that, which is not. I don't mean it was not in my environment, and it was 5th grade students that were slow learners, all well and good, but they're learning spelling and handwriting, and I wanted to be a literature teacher, right? So that was that little bit of a dichotomy. But then the worst thing that happened was that the teacher, all he did was scream and yell at the students. So even all the kids that wanted to learn, let's say the 1 or 2 behavior problems, the teacher escalated that so bad that nobody was even learning their spelling and their handwriting. And I'm like, it was just so not for me. And then, he was, basically telling me about the system. And I'm like, this is not for me. So it's my senior year. What do? I took the LSATs, didn't even prepare for them, and I did really, really well.
That's awesome.
So it got me into University of Richmond, and then I did really well there. So what that meant to me was I found my calling because it was a natural thing, I still sometimes have regrets because now I'm like, maybe if I had been an elementary school teacher, then I would have had more of knowing what to do with the spelling and the handwriting, and I could have liked that.
So my wife was an elementary school teacher,
Okay.
and she is no longer an elementary school teacher, and by all accounts will never ever be again an elementary school teacher. So I think you picked the right path.
Okay.
That's a very difficult.
Yes.
I mean, my hats go off to those people who do that work because it's an incredibly difficult job.
Yes. And so, my great-grandmother, my Bob, she would point her finger at me, you are going to be a doctor. And she'd scare me to death because, I'm like in elementary school. And I wasn't going to be a doctor, but at least I thought I'd be a teacher. I'm like, okay, law. Okay, I'll be a lawyer, And so so she, so went to law school, did well. So that meant to me, and I did work. I mean, don't get me wrong. I am right on the line of a millennial baby boomer. So, I've got the work ethic. So I did work for my grades, but it just was a very natural thing, because sometimes, like let's say chemistry class for me, you study like crazy, you work like hard and you get a D, but no, I studied like hard and I was getting A's. So
That's awesome.
So then I clerked at the Court of Appeals for a year after law school. And at that time, the Court of Appeals did criminal, domestic, and workers' comp. So that's where I got my little bit of knowledge of workers' comp. I did not even know it existed or what it was until I was at the Court of Appeals. And then I worked with some lawyers, Rye Marchant, Charles Samuels, Harrison Hubert, Happy Hubert. and for 16 years. And so that's when I did a little bit of everything, but I also was the only one doing workers' comp. And I did the 80-20 rule. 80% of my income was coming from workers' comp, and 20% of my time was on workers' comp. And at that time, I had narrowed it down to criminal, domestic, and workers' comp. And then, domestic was like 80% of my time, 20% of my income. So it was kind of crazy. And so I had a great entrepreneurial girlfriend, and she just said, raise your rate. So back in the day, I was doubling, tripling my domestic rates, again, to like equal it out. And they just kept on coming. And so I was like, I've got to do something because no offense to people who do criminal and domestic, but I love my criminal clients because basically, they're not good people, or sometimes they can not be good people, or they do make bad choices, but they love you as their lawyer. So they're so nice and kind and, great to me. And then domestic, they might be good people, but you are seeing them at their absolute worst. So whatever that absolute worst nastiness comes out. And workers' comp, you didn't have that. I mean, you did have some people that were at their absolute worst and were grumpy, but a lot of times it wasn't as much so. And so I just started just turning it down and referring it out. So then I think 2006 is when I decided solely to do workers' comp.
And here we are.
When
I think of workers' comp, well, I think a number of things workers' comp. One, like I need help because I don't know what it is. But also I think when someone loses their ability to work, I mean, it's so much more than just a financial loss. I mean, hearing you talk, I'm thinking like, man, if I lost my ability to do my job, the amount of purpose that I think I would lose would be difficult to replace. And so I'm sure in workers' comp, I mean, there are real issues because I mean, you've got people who've been doing this work day in and day out. It's a part of their life. It's part of their identity. And all of a sudden they can't do that thing anymore. And by the way, workers' comp is giving you what? 2/3 if they accept,
right.
They're not even giving you your full paycheck, right?
And not only that, it's a cap. So if you're making 150, I'm not sure exactly what it is, but like 150 or 175,000 a year, you're not even getting 2/3. You're capped at a max rate. So that's really bad. And what you're talking about is very real. I mean, a lot of people have depression. Not only, like you just said, they were, again, every single one of my clients were hard workers. They were working. And now they're sitting at home staring at four walls, okay, in pain, with an injury that will never let them go back to whatever their career was, okay? And it's hard. Nurses have been, done it 20, 30 years, or, factory workers, or like, let's say they're at Philip Morris and they're, right at their, golden 80, and now they can't, they're not going to make it, so to get those retirement benefits. Yeah.
It's awful. And my understanding, and this could just be I'm sure my own bias will come through here, is that workers' comp, while I'm sure there was noble intent in some respect, it was, hey, these employers don't want to be liable for injury claims from their employees, right? And so we'll create this workers' comp commission, and if you are hurt on the job, rather than having the ability to sue your employer, you go through this workers' comp commission. Is there some truth to that, or I'm curious in like how it originated and ultimately what its purpose is?
I used to say 100 years ago, but now it might be like 125 years ago. It was a shirt factory in New York City, and they didn't want people stealing a shirt or something like that. So they would literally put these chains and lock them in. And somebody lit a cigarette, and the whole thing burned up, and again, I always think of 9/11, people jumping out of windows. You had the people being burned alive inside, and then some people jumping out windows, and 16, 18, 20-year-olds, working in a shirt factory, and they each got the $17 each for their death. And so that's what started workers' comp. So the humanity of it was, and that was like the PI. That was the PI winning the at fault situation. The workers' comp part was, we won't make you wait. We'll give you immediate medical care and we'll give you a little bit of wages, but you're not going to bankrupt the business. You're never going to get pain and suffering. You're never going to get, like loss of career, loss of livelihood, loss of future benefits. Oh, I was about to make this tier or whatever. You don't get any of that, but you get this. Now, what's happened, again, 125 years, the employers, lobbyists have really done a lot of damage to the workers' comp system. So it's not immediate benefits. I mean, if they deny your case, you're looking maybe 9 months. And if they appeal it, you could even be a year, And then, like I said, not all accidents are covered, like repetitive injuries are not covered. So if every day you're lifting boxes overhead and you finally get a torn rotator cuff, that's not covered on a workers' comp.
Now, are you still barred from a PI suit?
No, you could do the PI suit, but how's a repetitive injury going to be a PI suit?
That's right. No, good point.
Yeah, good
you're
luck
out trying to prove
good
that.
luck, right? I mean, there could be. That's my Google searching. I'm
Right,
not going
no.
in that PI route.
Now, there are exceptions to it, right? I mean, in terms of the workers' comp bar, because that's a very serious bar in Virginia. And when I say bar, meaning if you are hurt on the job, there are very limited situations in which you can bring a traditional PI, a tort action against the employer, right? I mean, I believe, isn't sex assault an exception or there's some, and I could be completely off base here.
Not through workers' compensation.
Not through workers' comp.
For example, sexual assault. Sexual assault is actually an individual crime, so it takes it out of the work. Like, again, let me back up. If you're dating your coworker and then there's some type of a sexual assault, or some stalker and there's sexual assault, okay, then you're charging criminal charges against that person.
Right.
Or you might be suing your employer for allowing the sexual assault. So yes, there could be like a,
there could be a third party / negligent security type action, right?
Negative, right? But if it's something that had never been brought to their attention,
Well, yeah, I mean, without going down too much the rabbit hole.
But that's not workers' comp, but you're right.
Right. So but then you've got the foreseeability issues and Virginia negligent security law is difficult. But anyway, so workers' comp, I mean, today, someone gets hurt. What happens?
What is supposed to happen is the injured worker, who most likely has never been hurt before, has to give in writing within 30 days to the employer notice that they have been hurt at work and what caused it. So it's not just, hey, my arm's hurting, I'm going home for the day. No, it has to be, hey, I was lifting this something for, I fell off the ladder and I fell and hurt my shoulder. Okay. But if you just say, hey, my shoulder's hurt, that's not going to be, they're going to say that's not giving us notice of a work injury. So at that point, the employer is supposed to call the insurance adjuster. Rarely does that happen. And so I'm telling people all the time, you can call the ombudsman. Sorry, Lori. You can call the ombudsman at the Virginia Workers' Comp Commission, who can give you like the 800 number for, like, if this is your employer, this is their insurance carrier, and this is their 800 number. So I'm always telling people to call the adjuster and get your case going, because then the very next thing is they give you a panel of 3 doctors. You don't get to have a doctor of your choice, which is so different from personal injury. You have to go to their approved workers' comp doctor. So they give you a panel of 3, and then you pick one, and then you're basically stuck with that doctor. If that doctor says no surgery and you think you need surgery, or if that doctor is saying you need surgery and you don't want surgery, you're in a really tough spot.
Now, is this a doctor who is treating, or is a doctor who's just like overseeing?
Treating.
Who's treating?
Yeah,
okay.
And the majority of workers' comp are orthopedic injuries. Again, a lot of brain injuries with neurologists. but mostly it is orthopedic injuries, falling, lifting, that type of thing. And then we did have our COVID injury, the COVID, which was a little bit out of the ordinary, but majority are orthos. And we are very, very lucky in workers' comp in Virginia, because even though I might disagree with a bunch of the orthos here, we have great ortho doctors, in my personal opinion, at Ortho Virginia, Tuckahoe Orthopedic. You can't. And you know how doctors always have, you can have two different doctors, two good doctors, and they give two different opinions. You know what I mean? It's not.
Well, that happens in every case. For
exactly.
us, right?
Exactly. So we have in the past had a few quacks, but I think, I feel comfortable with most of the doctors we have that are our workers' comp treating physicians.
So let's take the example, injured worker, the insurance company is now on notice, and doctor says, yep, this is related, this makes sense. What happens next?
At that point, the insurance adjuster is going to voluntarily pay potentially lost wages if all the rules are met there, and will pay the doctor for medical care, whether it's MRIs, physical therapy, prescriptions, whatever the treatment plan may be. The trick that people don't know, which is so scary, is that all this is being done on a voluntary basis. And unfortunately, what might happen is the doctor will now say surgery, and then all of a sudden the case is denied, or they stop voluntarily paying because they did not go through the legal process as well, which is you get an award order through the Workers' Comp Commission. So there was no award order, which means they're not legally bound. Okay, so for example, you have to get lost wages, you must have in writing an out of work note. Okay, so the doctor says no work at all. You get a weekly, 2/3 of your average weekly wage, weekly check. And as long as the doctor says that, you keep on getting it. They're voluntarily paying you and they say surgery or whatever. You have an attitude with the adjuster because they're not approving physical therapy, you're cut off. Okay, by the time you go to court, 6-9 months, they have bled you out. And so one of my strategies is you immediately get under an award order as fast as you can. There are some exceptions as, for strategy-wise that you wouldn't. So that way, they can't cut you off. That way, they owe you late payment penalties if they cut you off. Okay?
What does that look like practically, getting to an award order for someone who's the panel doctor has said, yeah, this is related and we're treating you?
The workers' comp attorney or the client files what's called a claim for benefits with the Workers' Comp Commission. Okay? And that's another thing. People get so confused with the Workers' Comp Commission versus the Workers' Comp Insurance Carrier. They don't understand there's a court system involved. They just think it's insurance like health insurance. They don't understand there's like this, court system. And then the insurance adjuster at that point is supposed to draft what's called agreement forms, correctly describing the accident and the average weekly wage and everything, and give it to the injured worker who's supposed to sign it and mail it back to the insurance adjuster who is supposed to send it to the commission to create an award order. So at any of those steps, things don't happen. Insurance adjuster doesn't send you agreement forms. The client sees, he's supposed to be getting $900 a week and they're only paying him $800 a week, so he doesn't sign the paperwork or doesn't even understand he's supposed to sign the paperwork, or he signs it, sends it to the adjuster, and they just sit on it.
So at what point do you guys typically find yourselves getting involved? Is it within that first 30-day window, or is it often when things start going south?
We usually don't get involved till things start going south, but in my dream world, people are calling me the minute they get hurt, because we have 3 unique positions, and one of them is we help everyone who calls us, okay? And, the whole rising tide lifts all boats, okay? But I want everyone to be helped, whether it's a pinky, hangnail or, the worst catastrophic injury there can be. So what we do, and we have a great system, a great process. We have 4 people on our intake team where we educate. We give them the information, and then we follow up even with them. Okay, yeah, I'm back at work. Everything's great. That's the end. No, they're denying my MRI. I did get that agreement form, but they didn't have me, I didn't fill it out right. Okay, we kind of work there. And then there comes a time our intake team would know, you know what, this is the time you need to have an attorney. This time you need to at least speak to an attorney. So then there's 4 of us, 4 workers' comp attorneys in the firm, and they would speak to one of us. And at that point, that's when we're making that final decision. Yes, you need a lawyer.
Got it. And then so is that at that point, is that when a workers' comp attorney for the insurance company gets involved, or are they involved typically beforehand? And I recognize, I'm sure the answer is it depends, but.
Yeah. So normally the insurance adjuster is involved from day one, okay? But many times they change. One, it's a high turnover job, but the other thing is based on their reserves. Okay, this is a baby case, we're giving it to the young adjuster. No, this is a case that needs $100,000 in reserves, we're giving it to, mid-tier, whatever. If it's going to be denied, they probably get an attorney involved immediately, okay? But they're paying them hourly, so they don't usually. But even when in accepted cases, even when an injured worker gets an attorney, they don't even hire an attorney, okay? Because, again, especially the experienced adjusters, they know exactly what's going on. They get attorneys involved if they're going to a hearing, if something is denied. Right. They get defense attorneys get involved if there's going to be a settlement and they're talking, negotiations. But sometimes I'm even negotiating with adjusters, and they only get the defense attorney to drop the paperwork afterwards.
When you say accepted case, I think I have a good idea about what that means, but what is the definition of an accepted case versus a denied case?
An accepted case is one that's headed towards what I just said, an award order, or you already have that award order, okay, where they have agreed to lifetime medical benefits and other benefits too, but that, lifetime medical benefits, and let's just say they're getting a weekly check, okay?
And is there a schedule that dictates those benefits, or is there room to maneuver like in the PI world where a lot of these, the non-economics, for example, are up to someone's imagination or persuasiveness in front of a jury? How does that work in terms of setting amounts?
Unfortunately, it's just a little bit of money, and it's all pretty much math formulas.
And is there basically a big, I'm sure it's online at this point, but that says, all right, it's been this injury, and so this, how does that work in terms of figuring out the amount?
That's just lawyers knowing. Like, let's say PI lawyers and everybody dealing with medical injuries, you know what's going to happen. The guy goes to the doctor. The doctor orders physical therapy. Then he orders an MRI. Then he may do an injection, and then he's doing surgery. It's that same, the same protocol. So once you've seen that all, so many times, you kind of know when you see a herniated disc that they may be having surgery, right? If they only see, let's say, an annular tear, only see something, degenerative disc disease, they're not having surgery. So it's going to be just a physical therapy, injection, maybe pain management situation. But to kind of back up, this is what an injured worker is entitled to. More or less 4 benefits. One is 2/3 of their average weekly wage up to a cap, and it's about $1,400 so a week, $1,400 a week. So you could figure out if that's 2/3 what how much salary someone would have to make where you're actually making less. And like with COVID, with doctors, it was horrific. Like, they weren't even getting 25% of their wages. Okay, so with long haul. All right, so 2/3 of your wages for a maximum of 500 weeks. So back to the mental health issue that your career is over. They're only going to pay you for 9.5 years. Doesn't matter that your life is over. 2/3 of your wages. Then they give you lifetime medical benefits for the body parts that are listed. So, necks and shoulders get mixed up all the time with, I have pain, and they go, oh, that's your neck. No, that's your shoulder. But if you only mention your neck and you never mention your shoulder, they will never have to cover your shoulder, even though legitimately that was part of the injury. Okay.
Right. They're connected.
So let's just say your neck is covered. So you have lifetime medical care on your neck, but thousands of exceptions, but the doctor always has to say that it's related to the original injury. It has to be reasonable, necessary, and a couple of other things. But, if there's gaps in treatment, you have a car wreck 5 years down the road, your lifetime is going to get cut off. Okay.
So they'll revisit at that
every
point.
day.
Wow. Okay.
Every office visit, technically. I mean, a doctor could say, no, this is all arthritis now, so it's not related anymore.
Got it.
It's actually medical treating physician-based opinion is what's going to dictate how long your lifetime is.
Okay.
Lifetime medicals. Okay. But unfortunately, people go see the words lifetime medical, and they're thinking one thing when, unfortunately, I've seen the other.
Right.
If you, for example, you miss one too many physical therapy visits, your benefits are going to be your medical benefits are going to be cut off. Okay, there's all kinds of things like that. But, and again, those are when you need a lawyer. Okay. Then the third benefit you're entitled to is called permanent partial disability benefits. And that is for the permanent loss of use of a body part. Necks aren't covered, backs aren't covered. I have a client right now who was shot at a laundromat, and her heart is messed up. I've had people lose their bladder, crushed pelvises. None of that is related. It has to be a limb, your arm or your leg, or eyes or hearing. Okay, so if you lost your lip or lost your nose, okay, you would get something called scarring, but it doesn't matter. Okay, you don't get that benefit. And it's a math formula. So unfortunately, it's based on if you have low income or high income. So, the hardworking waitress who's working like a dog gets very little money, and then she's got this horrible permanent loss of her arm. She can't be carrying and lifting stuff anymore, right? She only gets 2/3 of her average weekly wage. 100% amputation of an arm is 200 weeks. 100% amputation of a leg is 175 weeks. So the doctor gives, you've got a 50% loss of your arm, and it's a pure math formula, okay? And then the last, if you die, they will pay your funeral expenses.
Is that benefit number 4? Or
Well, the one I was going to talk about is, I forget the real name. I know that sounds crazy, but I think it's at about $45,000 now. But it's for ramps, or if you need, it's not durable medical equipment, but it's one step up. Okay, accommodations for your house.
Got it.
Okay, so let's say you need handbars in your room in places. And again, let's say you're paralyzed and you want a van that you can use. They'll give you $50,000 or $45,000 towards that. So.
And that's it. Mm-hmm. So where does the litigation come into play? And it sounds like just in going through all those things, there's numbers of different places where you can see people needing to take a position where there's been a denial or something along those lines. But I imagine, let's go back to the very beginning, right? So someone's hurt on the job and they make a claim, panel doctor says no. Is that where you all come in?
We can, again, if the injury is serious enough, meaning that you're not going to be back at work full-time, no problems in 3 months, let's say.
Right.
I like taking cases then when there are no problems, because then I can prevent the problem.
That's right. You can shape it, right?
I can shape it.
It's like motions practice for trial work, right? You can shape the battlefield
Right.
before you get in there.
Right. Like a client calls frustrated. I'm just going to submit this under my regular insurance because I want this MRI. I would be encouraging them not to do that because, again, for whatever reasons. But as an example, so we have a huge process and system for what I call managing a case, okay? So we manage what I would call accepted cases, and then if a case was denied, then we go to a hearing and we win, we do it. There's all this stuff like with pre-approval. Like, let's say they deny you getting an MRI, or they deny you the referral to pain management. There's something called ADR, where we're going to not a hearing, we're going to, like, I guess like a mediation. Within 7 days, the other side has to accept or deny it, and we're pushing that stuff through to keep treatment going fast, as opposed to you being frustrated. Like, again, as a layman, you don't know you can file for an ADR. You're just going, why can't I go get my physical therapy? Why can't I get my physical therapy? And like, we go, enough is enough, let's boom. And it gets done. Now, again, the whole thing about do we make money off of that? No. Okay. Do I care? No. I mean, in the sense of what I'm doing is I'm maximizing the value of many of those cases, maybe even most of those cases. So when the time comes to settle, yes, our client's going to get a lot more money and we will get a lot more money, okay, when we settle. Or I'm maximizing it so that we have the squeakiest clean hands when we go to a hearing, so we definitely win.
Let's talk about, what does a workers' comp hearing look like?
A modified jury trial. There is almost like a divorce, like domestic relations, okay? It's not a jury trial, but there's evidence. And again, people go to a hearing. Unfortunately, they go pro se. They don't have their evidence together, and it's a one or done. And if you don't come with your evidence, you lose, right? But anyway, you go to a hearing. They set them for 30 minutes. They're throughout the state of Virginia. There's several, I don't even know, maybe even 15. I don't know, 10 to 15 hearing offices. Usually they're in the circuit courts around the area, like Danville and Fairfax, everywhere. And Spotsylvania, Charlottesville, Roanoke. They're just Abington. You don't want to go that far, But so it's automatically, which is really weird, is they're automatically set. So you have no control of the date. And so then, of course, there's conflicts. Defense attorney has conflicts. We have conflicts. It's a very strange way they set the hearings. And then it gets continued 2 or 3 times because of that situation. But it's set for 30 minutes, which is very short. I can't imagine how anyone really does get through some of them in 30 minutes. I usually am asking for like an hour. And then if I have like 4 or 5 witnesses, like a real full-blown type of situation, I'm asking for half a day. So there's no opening statement, but I always kind of do one. There's no closing statement.
So it's just the presentation of evidence through either witness or Now, who's the fact finder?
They're called deputy commissioners. To my clients, I call them judges because that's what they are. They're called hearings, not trials. I guess it might be more like a Social Security disability hearing, except for I think they don't even have a defense attorney on the other side. So it's not quite like that. But you hear evidence, you do objections, you do all of that. There's lots of exceptions to hearsay. For example, we're allowed to, and I use this a lot, we're allowed to get doctors to write reports, and that we can put in. So we're never calling doctors to a hearing.
Right. Okay.
But you're having witnesses testify. You're having maybe it's about job search, or did the accident actually happen? So you're going to have eyewitnesses.
How often do you find yourself going to these?
Probably similar to personal injury. I'm going to say probably 90% settle, maybe. But you've got hearings set, 1 a week, 2 a week sometimes.
Oh, wow. Well, just like personal injury, right? Without a trial date, you're not going to get it resolved.
Exactly.
And so without some hearing date where we expect there will be some sort of resolution, there's no real leverage to resolve the thing.
Exactly.
Right? So,
It's exactly the same. And so what you're doing, which I'm sure personal injury attorneys do the same, and sometimes clients don't understand it. Do you want to settle? Yes. Well, how are you settling? Well, I'm setting depositions. I'm sending out ROGs. I'm sending out subpoenas. And they're like, I didn't know we were going to court. I thought we were going to try to. Well, you got to do both.
You have to. And actually, the only way to get real value for a client is to make it clear to the insurance company that you're willing and able to go the distance, right?
Exactly.
And it's interesting. And this issue came up this morning. We have a case in which we reached out to their side, and there's two law firms on the other. There's two other defendants represented by two different law firms, and we're like, guys, it's time to get a trial date. Let's get on a call. Let's call the court. And they pushed back. They said, no, I think the case is too early to get a trial date. And I had to come back. Knowing me, and for those of you who know me, who listen to this podcast, I got fired up, and I don't be like, well, what right do you have? But no, I did the right thing. I said respectfully, we can get a trial date either through mutual agreement, calling the court, or we'll just set it for a docket call, right? Like, there's just this idea of delay is a friend, unfortunately, to the defense, and is not good for our clients. Our clients have been hurt. They want their justice. They want it to come soon, and for them, it's every day, right? They're living this injury. Their life has changed, right? And so by getting that trial date, we finally at least have something on the calendar. We finally have deadlines, and there's at least some pressure to work towards resolution. So at our firm, and I tell everybody, like, you gotta, if you're not willing to try the thing, don't file it. And then two, if you do file it, the insurance company's not just going to be like, oh, here's a lot of money. No, you have to work the case.
Yeah.
Like, you have to do it, or it's just not going to happen. And but anyways, well, that's all the same. It's the same with criminal. It's the same. You have, in order to get good results, you have to do the work, and that's what separates the lawyers who are doing a good job for their clients and the lawyers who aren't getting full value. So it's very clear from this conversation, one, that I still have no business giving any advice about workers' compensation. There is a lot that goes into it. And we could probably spend an hour talking about the implications of workers' compensation on personal injury cases and the liens and having them waived and the pros and cons and the different incentives based on the adjuster. I've learned a little bit, just enough to be dangerous. But what I would like to know is, like, what is it about this work that keeps you doing it? So we heard the story, right? You were doing domestic, you were doing criminal, you were doing workers' comp, and then ultimately the 80-20 rule led you to, you know what? Let's do workers' comp. You've been doing it for years now. So just a few, right? Just a couple years. But what is it that has got you motivated day in, day out to keep doing this type of work?
It gives me so much purpose and meaning, and I don't, is it one particular person? I can tell you, some people that have had a profound effect on me. You know what I mean?
Well, now that's my next question.
Okay,
so please.
But, what is it that, honestly, I wouldn't be doing it if it was, like, let's say, just a job. I get profound meaning, and the only thing I can think of is there's 19 of us now. We are doing good for people. You know what I mean? And I don't mean it like that just like helping people who don't step foot in our door. That is help, even though it's not, me taking it to a hearing. We are helping educate people in a place where they don't know anything.
And they need the help.
And they need the help. And I guess, these people sometimes, like, are crying and saying how thankful they are. And you're like, that fed me for a year, There's that. But also, again, from the legal stuff, I always have loved, I guess, more of the litigation, right? Like, I was not a corporate lawyer, I did bankruptcy for a claim, or I don't know what they're called, but, the individual, I've done some of that stuff. I've done collection work. That was so no meaning. It was just, individuals, like helping the individual, whether it was criminal, domestic, or workers' comp, or the few PIs I did. But you are making a difference in the world. I do believe that I'm in one individual's world, because kind of like what you just said, I think you were saying earlier, it's not just, let's just say, the father who, and let me give a shout out to Kids Chance in a second. It's not just the father who's lost his career. Now the wife who thought they could kind of work and I'm being a little stereotypical, maybe could work part-time or retire early. No, now they're going to have to work till they're 70, because now the husband who's 55, she can't retire at 65 because you know what I mean? And then the kids, they might not be able to go to college. The kids, they might be losing, the car. They might be losing the house, all kinds of stuff. It affects, it's a whole thing that it's doing. It's not, now again, it might not be that bad for everybody. And then God help the people that have no support system by themselves. They're losing everything. They literally are losing. Well,
they're losing
everything.
Their community too. I mean,
so Kids Chance is a foundation that I helped found about 10 years ago with Berkeley Net. It's a national thing, but we founded the Virginia chapter. And what we do is we give scholarships to people going to college where their parents had been injured in a work accident. And it is $5,000 every year right now. And we've been going up. It might even be $6,000 now. We've got the insurance companies behind us. We got the money. We need students who want money. So it's, if you were hurt at work, your kids can get a very good scholarship. It's not like writing a 3-page essay for $500. I mean, you're going to get this while you're, we've paid for people in graduate school. We also pay for trade school.
That's awesome.
Anybody who wants, we have a Kids Chance of Virginia is, it's on the website. Google it. And
we'll make sure we add that to the show notes, so people. That's huge.
Yes.
And a lot of times people just don't know that stuff's
and
out there.
Right, and they don't know.
Yeah.
People don't know.
Exactly. And Google doesn't always give you the right answer.
That's
right?
true too.
So, now we got ChatGPT, which makes stuff up. But so, anyways, well, now I'm curious. So you mentioned there's been a few clients who've really touched you. Can you share a story about one of them?
Sure. It was a 19-year-old boy working undocumented, and he he was cleaning the gutters of a 2-story apartment complex. So he had one of those really big ascension ladders, and it was 4 of them, and it had been raining, but it wasn't raining then, but it got only about 5 feet from the power line, and it went down there. Huge explosion. There was a golf course nearby. They saw it. They called 911. One of them caught on fire. It was horrific injury. And so my client, 19-year-old kid, completely lost his hand above the wrist, because when you get electrocuted, it goes through your extremities. So he completely lost that arm. And what's sad is I've probably had about 10 electrocution cases that have not resulted in death. I've probably had a lot more that have resulted in death. So unfortunately, this is not as uncommon as you would hope it would be. And then he lost half his foot. So he had his ankle and his heel, but maybe where the arch is where he lost that foot. And then his other hand, he lost I'm not sure if it was 3 or 2 fingers, but he had his thumb and his index finger, and they were crinkled, but they did not move. So basically, he really had no hands because the left hand could not work, okay? And we're talking 19-year-old kid.
Yikes.
So, okay, so then for whatever reasons, I never spoke or met his parents, okay? So I'm his mama. You know what I mean? I am not going to let, he was by himself, right? And so I was not. I mean, maybe less than 2 million. I think it was 1.8 million in VCU medical expenses. And probably a month out of being out of the rehab. Like, you go to a lot of times in catastrophic situations, you're in the hospital for a month or so, and then you go to a rehab center. And again, workers' comp denies the case. Why that's so bad is there's no reason to have denied that case. Okay. There's no exception there's millions of exceptions, but none of them fit this case, right?
And when you say deny, is that like one of the panel doctors?
No, the workers' comp insurance carrier said we're not paying.
Got it.
Denied.
Okay.
So going to a hearing, which is, again, we're going towards the hearing. One bad thing is because he was undocumented, when you're not here legally, if you have a valid visa and all that, you're totally okay. They have to pay medicals, and they only have to pay lost wages if the doctor has you totally 100% out of work. Because the theory in workers' comp is if you're here illegally, then if you have light duty, you're not working because of your work injury. You're not working because of your lack of documents. Okay. So his horrific doctor had to have known this and said, no lifting over 1 pound with his left hand, because that was the hand that had the 2 fingers. So he at this stage has no income. I mean, the law says you don't get wages. And again, when you're undocumented, you can't get Medicaid, you can't even pay for health insurance and all these things. So he was in a horrific situation of every day that passed was one more day he wasn't getting physical therapy in that hand. It was one more day he couldn't get prosthetics and then get fitted and learn how to use those things. And again, we're talking about a 19-year-old kid. I mean, life has changed, and he's just sitting and waiting and waiting. So obviously I'm fighting, doing all the I'm, doing everything you would do and then some as aggressively as I can. And so eventually we settle for a lot of money. It was like $3 million. But what I did, again, 19-year-old kid, I kind of encouraged him, and he was going to do what I said, to put it in structured settlements.
Right.
Because one, I didn't want his next door neighbor buddy to steal all his money. And two, I wanted him to have it at different increments so he could get like updated prosthetics. Because prosthetics last 7 to 10 years. And I wanted him to have prosthetics. So I kind of put money in I made all these different annuities and all these different things to get it good. And it took quite a bit to get the insurance company to do it, but they knew I wasn't playing, and they knew, again, they were going to have, and I had to deal with the lien with VCU and I had to do a lot of stuff to get my client the money. So, and then the cutest thing was, and again, this might have been maybe 8 years ago. It's been a while. But the cutest thing is he got a car, and he was so excited when he got a car. And I'm like, oh, Lord. But he wanted to come by and show us the car. So he drove the car in, and I was so happy. It was a great used car. I just didn't want it to be some brand new Mustang,
Or the $70,000 F-150.
Yeah, with a $3,000 a month car payment. I was like, yes, he did the right thing. And he was all happy. And then, and he's come by twice. So that just...
Well, you changed his life.
That makes me feel good about that one.
That is awesome. That's incredible. And I imagine that's one of probably many stories that you have, which probably keeps you going.
Yeah, and I'm sure y'all do too.
I mean, that's why we do this work. I mean, we really think, me personally, I mean, I think our job is threefold. It's, at least on the personal injury side, we want accountability, right? We want, our clients want the wrongdoer to say, I'm sorry. I recognize what was wrong. 2, there's an element of deterrence in the work that we do that I think is incredibly important. The single event cases, the car wreck cases, hopefully the person who was careless and hurt our client won't do that again. They'll learn from this. And when we're talking about our big corporate defendants, hopefully we can encourage policy changes or procedures that stop these types of injuries from happening. And then the last thing, which is incredibly meaningful to me and our clients, is we don't ask for money. We ask for juries to recognize the value, the full and fair value of what was taken from our clients' health and quality of life. And it just so happens to be, it is money.
Right.
So
you can't get their life back.
Yeah, we can't. The best thing that could ever happen is we go back in time and they are not hurt. The second best thing is all we have is something, compensation that at least recognizes that value. And my crusade of many is we as a society don't give enough value to the things that are really important. And I mean, we even see it within our own field, right? In personal injury, you always hear, well, how much were the medical bills? Well, why do the medical bills matter? I mean, now certainly we're going to use them if they're helpful to our client, but how about the ability to go play with your kid that you can't do anymore, right? Like what type of value does that have, right? I mean, is that a little bit of value or is that significant value? And it's funny, but oftentimes I'm talking to friends and I'm like, what's the value of this case? And they ask me for economic stuff and then they give me a number and then I'm like, okay, cool. I appreciate that. Well, for the injuries that my guy's dealing with, if you had to have those injuries, how much money would you want in exchange? And then the number goes up another 10 times, right?
So like they can relate, see it.
I mean, because I mean, when you start realizing, yikes, if this were to happen to me, what would it take? But anyway, I'm very grateful to like what I do, or not like, to love what I do. And it sounds like you are the same. Yeah. So, well, this has been a lot of fun. I do have one more question. Is that okay?
Sure.
So if you could go back 5 years ago to when you first became a lawyer, I'm joking, but if you could go back to when you first became an attorney, what would you tell yourself? What advice would you give yourself?
Take risks sooner. Like going out on my own took me 16 years. All right, so I don't know if that's a risk or whatever, but take risks sooner, and appreciate the small things, and also be happy when things are slow, because it would give you time to, let's say, build your practice or think about things or do something like, write a report that could help people versus just, when you're so busy down in the cases, you don't have that luxury of that time.
This has been a lot of fun. Thank you so much for joining us, and I look forward to staying in touch with you.
Thank you for listening to this episode of RVA Trial Lawyers, Virginia's trial lawyer podcast. For more episodes, check out rvatriallawyers.com.